Most people pray desperately, begging an external God for help, never realizing they're actually pushing away the very thing they seek. Joel Goldsmith discovered a revolutionary truth that changed everything. God isn't separate from you, waiting to be convinced. The divine presence is your own consciousness when freed from human beliefs. Traditional prayer keeps you in victim consciousness, believing you lack something that must be granted from outside. But Goldsmith learned that authentic prayer isn't asking for anything. It's the recognition of what already is. When you stop begging and start recognizing, miracles become natural expressions of your true nature. This isn't positive thinking or wishful hoping. This is the mystical secret that dissolves the illusion of separation between you and infinite supply, health, and harmony. Every problem exists only in the realm of human belief, not in spiritual reality. Your consciousness, aligned with truth, is the healing presence itself. Goldsmith spent years praying the traditional way, asking God to heal his clients, to provide solutions, to change circumstances. Results were inconsistent and temporary. Then came the breakthrough that revolutionized spiritual healing. He stopped asking God to do something and started recognizing what God already is. In that moment of recognition, healings became instantaneous and permanent. Not because God finally decided to act, but because Goldsmith stopped interfering with divine action through his human concepts of lack, limitation, and separation. The healing presence was always there, waiting for recognition, not supplication. This recognition prayer isn't a technique you learn, it's a consciousness you become. When you embody this understanding, your very presence becomes a healing atmosphere. People around you experience spontaneous improvements because you're no longer projecting the belief in problems that need fixing. Here's what changes everything. God never hears your words. God responds to your consciousness. When your consciousness is filled with fear, lack, and limitation, that's what manifests regardless of how beautifully you pray. But when consciousness recognizes its own divine nature, prayer becomes unnecessary because you are the answer. Goldsmith discovered that every genuine healing happened not when he prayed harder, but when he stopped praying altogether and simply rested in the recognition of spiritual perfection. In that silence, the human sense of problems dissolved, revealing the harmony that was always present beneath the illusion. This isn't about believing in God. It's about recognizing that the I that is conscious right now is God expressing as individual being. You don't have to become spiritual. You are spiritual. You simply need to stop believing in the illusion of separation that makes prayer seem necessary in the first place. The most profound prayer Goldsmith ever prayed contained no words, made no requests, sought nothing. It was pure recognition. I and the Father are one. Not as future possibility, but as present reality. In that recognition, everything that seemed to need healing or changing simply wasn't there anymore. This recognition doesn't require faith, hope, or belief. It requires only the willingness to see through the illusion of separation that makes you think you're a human being who needs divine help. You are divine help, appearing as human experience. Problems exist only when you forget this truth. When you truly understand this, traditional prayer becomes impossible. How can you ask yourself for what you already are? Instead, you rest in being, and from that rest, perfect action emerges naturally. This is the secret that transforms every aspect of your experience from limitation to limitless expression. Sarah had prayed for her son's healing for 3 years. Traditional prayers, desperate pleading, bargaining with God. Nothing changed. Then she learned Goldsmith's approach. Instead of asking God to heal her son, she recognized that in spiritual reality, her son was already perfect, whole, and complete. Within 2 weeks of this shift in consciousness, her son's condition began improving dramatically. The doctors called it spontaneous remission, but Sarah understood the truth. She had stopped projecting the belief in disease and started recognizing the spiritual perfection that was always there. This wasn't positive thinking or denial. Sarah still took her son to medical appointments and followed treatments, but her consciousness no longer held the belief that healing needed to happen. She recognized that healing was the natural state, and illness was only a temporary appearance in human experience. Marcus lost his job and spent months praying for employment, growing more desperate with each rejection. His prayers were filled with fear, lack, and limitation. Then he discovered Goldsmith's principle. Consciousness is the substance of all form. His fearful consciousness was actually creating more experiences of lack. He stopped praying for a job and began recognizing himself as the source of infinite supply. Not through affirmations or visualizations, but through the deep understanding that consciousness, being infinite, can never actually lack anything. Lack is only a belief, not a spiritual reality. Within days, opportunities began appearing from unexpected sources, not because God finally answered his prayers, but because his consciousness was no longer broadcasting the belief in limitation. He had become receptive to the abundance that was always trying to express through him. Linda's marriage was failing. She prayed constantly for God to change her husband, to make him more loving, more understanding. The more she prayed, the worse their relationship became. Then she learned Goldsmith's revolutionary approach. You can never change another person through prayer because there is no other person. There is only one consciousness expressing as infinite individual beings. When she stopped trying to change her husband and began recognizing the divine nature expressing as both of them, their relationship transformed naturally, not through external change, but through the recognition of their spiritual unity. This doesn't mean becoming passive or accepting abuse. It means recognizing that harmony is the natural state of being when consciousness is aligned with truth. From this recognition, right action emerges naturally, whether that's deeper intimacy or clear boundaries. David faced bankruptcy. Traditional prayers for money had failed completely. When he learned to recognize consciousness as the source of all supply, something remarkable happened. Instead of money appearing, better opportunities emerged. His business transformed, debts restructured themselves, and abundance flowed through channels he never imagined. The key wasn't asking for money, it was recognizing that consciousness, being infinite, can never actually be bankrupt. Financial problems exist only in human belief, not in spiritual reality. When consciousness aligns with this truth, material supply follows naturally as the outer expression of inner abundance. If these transformation stories inspire you, like this video to help others find these teachings, subscribe for more Joel Goldsmith wisdom, and comment. What healing journey resonated most with you? Beyond recognition prayer, Goldsmith discovered the power of treatment through consciousness. This isn't visualization or mental manipulation. It's the practice of knowing the truth about any situation until that truth becomes your lived experience. When consciousness holds only spiritual reality, human appearances must conform. For physical healing, instead of fighting disease, you recognize that in spiritual reality, there is no disease. There is only perfect, harmonious being expressing as individual existence. You don't try to heal anything. You recognize that healing is unnecessary because perfection is the only reality. This recognition isn't a mental exercise. It's a shift in the very foundation of your being. When consciousness truly recognizes spiritual perfection, the body naturally expresses that perfection because consciousness is the substance from which all form emerges. The practice of spiritual discernment transforms every challenge into an opportunity for deeper recognition. When problems appear, instead of seeing them as real conditions requiring solutions, you discern between appearance and reality. The appearance may seem real, but reality is always spiritual perfection. This discernment isn't denial of human experience. You still take practical action when necessary, but your consciousness isn't fooled by appearances. You see through the illusion to the spiritual reality underneath, and from that recognition, right action emerges naturally. Every person, situation, and condition is an opportunity to practice this discernment. Each time you choose to see spiritual reality instead of human appearance, your consciousness becomes clearer, and your experience becomes more harmonious. Goldsmith taught the profound practice of meditation without desire. Most meditation seeks something: peace, healing, enlightenment. But true meditation is the complete absence of seeking. It's resting in being without wanting anything to be different than it is right now. In this meditation, you don't try to contact God or achieve any particular state. You simply rest in the recognition that what you are seeking, you already are. The peace you want is your nature. The healing you need is your reality. The enlightenment you desire is your true identity. From this rest in being, all necessary action arises naturally. You don't make decisions from human reasoning. You allow divine intelligence to express as right action through your individual experience. This is living from consciousness instead of trying to improve consciousness. The practice of invisible supply reveals how abundance operates in spiritual reality. Instead of looking to external sources for what you need, you recognize consciousness as the source of all supply. Every form of abundance is simply consciousness appearing as whatever is needed in the moment. This isn't about attracting money or material things. It's about recognizing that consciousness, being infinite, contains within itself everything necessary for harmonious expression. When you need something, instead of looking for it externally, you recognize it as already present in consciousness. This recognition often brings supply through unexpected channels. Not because you attracted it, but because consciousness naturally expresses as whatever form is needed. Supply follows recognition, not human effort or manipulation. This is how miracles become natural occurrences. Many people struggle with this approach because their human mind keeps interfering. Thoughts arise saying, "This isn't working," or "I need to do something." Goldsmith taught that these thoughts are not yours. They're the voice of human belief trying to maintain its illusion of separation and limitation. The practice is to neither fight these thoughts nor believe them. Simply recognize them as appearances in consciousness, no more real than clouds passing through the sky. Your true identity remains untouched by these temporary mental formations. When doubt arises, don't try to overcome it with positive thinking. Simply return to the recognition of what you are, consciousness itself, appearing as individual being. From this recognition, doubt naturally dissolves because it has no foundation in reality. Physical symptoms often intensify when you begin this practice, not because it's not working, but because consciousness is bringing hidden beliefs to the surface for recognition and release. This is actually a sign of deep healing, though it may not feel comfortable initially. Instead of being discouraged by temporary increases in symptoms, recognize them as beliefs leaving consciousness. Each symptom is an opportunity to practice deeper recognition of spiritual perfection. Don't fight the symptoms. Recognize through them to the reality of perfect being. This process requires patience and persistence. Years of human belief don't dissolve overnight. But each moment of recognition, regardless of how brief, establishes your consciousness more firmly in spiritual reality. Healing is happening even when appearances suggest otherwise. Relationships often become challenging when one person begins practicing recognition consciousness, while others remain in traditional human thinking. Family members may resist or misunderstand your new approach to life's challenges. The practice here is to recognize the divine nature of others, even when they're expressing human limitation. You don't try to convince them of spiritual truth. You simply hold them in consciousness as perfect spiritual beings, regardless of their current expression. This often leads to natural harmony without any external discussion or conflict. When your consciousness recognizes only spiritual perfection in others, they tend to express more of their divine nature in your presence. Change happens through consciousness, not through human persuasion. Financial challenges persist for some because they're trying to use spiritual principles to get material results, which keeps them trapped in human consciousness. True spiritual supply isn't about getting money. It's about recognizing consciousness as the source of all form, including material abundance. When you need something, instead of worrying about where it will come from or how you'll afford it, rest in the recognition that consciousness already contains everything necessary for harmonious expression. Supply appears through whatever channel is most natural and beneficial. If these challenge-breaking techniques speak to your heart, like to support this content, subscribe for advanced spiritual practices, and comment, which obstacle are you ready to transform now? Advanced practitioners learn to live from recognition consciousness throughout daily activities. Instead of moving through your day as a human being trying to be spiritual, you recognize yourself as spiritual being appearing as human experience. Every activity becomes an expression of divine consciousness. This transforms work from mere employment into divine service. Relationships become opportunities for consciousness to recognize itself. Even mundane tasks become expressions of infinite intelligence appearing as individual action. Nothing is separate from the divine expression of being. This isn't about thinking spiritual thoughts while doing human activities. It's about recognizing that what you call you is actually consciousness itself, appearing as individual expression. From this recognition, all activity becomes harmonious because it's sourced in divine intelligence. Healing others becomes effortless when you understand that there is no other to heal. There is only one consciousness expressing as infinite individual beings. When someone appears to need healing, you recognize the spiritual perfection of your shared being, and that recognition is the healing. You don't send healing energy or pray for their improvement. You simply rest in the recognition that in spiritual reality, they are already perfect, whole, and complete. This recognition in your consciousness appears as healing in their experience because consciousness is indivisible. This approach works regardless of physical proximity. Distance is only a concept in human belief, not a reality in consciousness. When consciousness recognizes spiritual perfection, that recognition expresses as healing wherever it's needed, because consciousness is everywhere present. Business and career transform when conducted from recognition consciousness instead of human ambition. Instead of trying to succeed or avoid failure, you recognize consciousness as the intelligence expressing through all genuine activity. Success becomes the natural expression of divine intelligence. This doesn't mean becoming passive or avoiding practical action. It means taking action from recognition rather than from fear or desire. When consciousness recognizes its own infinite intelligence, right action emerges naturally, leading to harmonious results. Competition disappears because you recognize consciousness as the source of all genuine activity. What benefits one expression of consciousness benefits all. Cooperation becomes natural because you recognize your essential unity with everyone and everything in your business environment. Parenting from recognition consciousness transforms both you and your children. Instead of trying to control or improve their behavior, you recognize their spiritual perfection. This recognition creates an atmosphere where their divine nature naturally expresses more consistently. You still provide guidance and maintain appropriate boundaries, but from recognition rather than fear. Your consciousness, resting in spiritual truth about your children, becomes the healing influence that supports their natural development and expression of divine qualities. This approach often produces remarkable changes in children's behavior and development, not through external manipulation, but through the recognition of their true nature. Children are naturally responsive to consciousness that recognizes their divine identity. Complete transformation occurs when recognition becomes your natural state, rather than a practice you do. You no longer shift from human consciousness to spiritual consciousness. You simply rest in the recognition of what you've always been, consciousness itself. From this recognition, life becomes effortless. Not because challenges disappear, but because consciousness meets every appearance with appropriate action sourced in divine intelligence. You don't overcome problems. You recognize through them to the spiritual reality that dissolves them. This is not a perfect human life. It's the recognition that perfect spiritual being is expressing as human experience. Every moment becomes an opportunity for deeper recognition and more harmonious expression of divine consciousness. The ultimate realization is that there was never anything wrong that needed fixing, no one separate who needed healing, nothing missing that required supply. These were all appearances in consciousness, like dreams that seem real until awakening reveals their illusory nature. You don't become spiritual through this practice. You recognize the spiritual nature that you've always been. Problems don't get solved. They're revealed as having no foundation in reality. Healing doesn't happen. The illusion of disease is seen through to the spiritual perfection that was never actually disturbed. This recognition doesn't make you indifferent to human experience. Instead, it makes you infinitely compassionate because you see through all appearances of limitation to the divine nature that is everyone's true identity. Living this understanding daily requires no effort because it's not something you do. It's the recognition of what is. Every person you meet is consciousness recognizing itself. Every situation is consciousness expressing as experience. Every challenge is an invitation to deeper recognition. Prayer becomes unnecessary because you are the answer to every prayer. Seeking ends because what you sought, you are. Healing is recognized as the natural state, and disease as temporary appearance. Supply is recognized as consciousness itself, and lack as impossible illusion. This doesn't make you superhuman. It reveals your true nature as spiritual being expressing in human form. From this recognition, miraculous becomes natural, and natural becomes expression of infinite divine intelligence appearing as your individual experience. Joel Goldsmith's ultimate teaching is beautifully simple. You are not a human being having spiritual experiences. You are a spiritual being having human experiences. This recognition transforms everything while changing nothing, because what you are seeking, you already are. Stop praying to God and recognize yourself as the divine presence you are seeking. Stop asking for healing and recognize yourself as wholeness itself. Stop looking for supply and recognize consciousness as infinite abundance expressing as your experience. This is not the end of your journey. It's the beginning of living from your true identity. Every moment offers the opportunity to recognize more deeply what you are and to express more fully the divine consciousness that is your real nature. If your spiritual understanding expanded through these Joel Goldsmith secrets, like this video, subscribe for more transformative teachings, and comment, "I am transformed," to confirm your new path.
Have you ever stood at a crossroads in your life, desperately needing to make a decision, and found yourself looking up at the sky, pleading for a sign that never seems to come? Perhaps you've whispered prayers into the darkness, asking God to just tell you what to do, which path to take, which door to walk through, only to be met with what feels like deafening silence. If you've ever felt this way, you're not alone. And what I'm about to share with you might completely transform how you experience divine guidance in your everyday life. Here's the truth that most of us have never been told. We've been taught to seek God's voice in all the wrong places. From childhood, we've been conditioned to believe that divine guidance comes from somewhere out there, from the heavens above, from sacred texts, from spiritual leaders, or through elaborate rituals and ceremonies. We've learned to treat God's wisdom as something external, something distant, something we must reach for with all our might. Has this ever happened to you? You face a critical decision about your career, your relationships, your finances, or your health, and you find yourself feeling spiritually paralyzed, unable to move forward, because you're waiting for some external confirmation that just doesn't arrive. The tragedy isn't that God isn't speaking, it's that we've forgotten how to listen to the voice that's been speaking within us all along. Think about the last major decision you struggled with. Maybe it was whether to leave a job that was draining your soul, or whether to invest in an opportunity that seemed risky, or how to navigate a relationship that had become complicated. In those moments of crisis, when you cried out for guidance, did you feel abandoned? Did you wonder if perhaps you weren't worthy enough, spiritual enough, or good enough for God to answer? The weight of that silence can be crushing, leaving us feeling isolated in our most vulnerable moments. But before we begin, please hit the like button and let me know where in the world you're watching from today. It's always fascinating seeing who's joining us from around the world. And if you haven't already, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any of our future videos. What if I told you that every unanswered prayer, every moment of confusion, every decision where you felt utterly alone, all of it stems from a single, profound misunderstanding about where divine guidance actually resides? The voice you've been seeking in the clouds, in church buildings, in the words of others, has been whispering within your own consciousness this entire time, closer to you than your own heartbeat, more intimate than your own thoughts. Stay with me until the end of this teaching, because what you're about to discover will fundamentally shift how you approach not just the big, life-altering decisions, but every single choice you make throughout your day. The 5 daily alignments we're going to explore together aren't about adding more spiritual practices to an already overwhelming schedule. They're about remembering something you've always known but somehow forgot, that the kingdom of heaven, That place where perfect wisdom and divine clarity exist, isn't somewhere you need to travel to reach. It's already inside you, right now, in this very moment. This is the revolutionary truth that changes absolutely everything about how you make decisions, and it's simpler than you've ever imagined. We've been approaching divine guidance as if it's some mystical skill that requires decades of meditation practice or special spiritual gifts that only a chosen few possess. But here's what's actually happening. The wisdom you need for every decision, from the mundane to the life-altering, is already flowing through your consciousness like a river that never stops moving. The only question is whether you've learned to recognize it, to feel its current, to trust its direction. Imagine waking up tomorrow morning and instead of immediately reaching for your phone to scroll through the anxiety-inducing noise of the world, you pause for just a moment and sense that quiet presence within you. Not something you have to conjure up through effort or strain, but something that's simply there, waiting to be acknowledged. That difficult conversation you've been avoiding at work. You approach it with a clarity that surprises even you. The financial decision that's been keeping you awake at night. Suddenly, the right path becomes obvious, not through logical analysis alone, but through an inner knowing that transcends mere calculation. The relationship tension that normally triggers your deepest insecurities. You respond from a place of groundedness that feels both foreign and familiar at the same time. I create these videos for seekers ready to move beyond surface-level spirituality into genuine transformation. If this resonated with you, subscribe and join this community learning to hear God's voice in everyday decisions. This isn't fantasy or wishful thinking. It's what becomes possible when you shift from seeking guidance externally to recognizing the divine voice that speaks through your own awareness. The transformation in how you experience decision-making doesn't require you to become someone different or to achieve some elevated spiritual status. It happens through what I call the 5 daily alignments, simple adjustments in perception that reconnect you with the wisdom that's been broadcasting within you all along. These aren't complicated rituals or time-consuming practices that demand an extra hour carved out of your already overwhelming schedule. They're micro-shifts in awareness, moments of recognition that can happen while you're sitting in traffic, standing in line at the grocery store, or lying in bed before sleep. Now, I want to go even deeper into what makes this approach so radically different from everything else. You've tried. The hidden truth behind truly aligned decision-making isn't found in gathering more information, consulting more experts, or waiting for perfect external conditions. It emerges when your consciousness learns to distinguish between the anxious chatter of fear-based thinking and the quiet, steady voice of divine wisdom that never shouts but always speaks with unmistakable clarity. Behind the scenes of every decision you've ever made that felt genuinely right, that brought unexpected peace even when it didn't make logical sense, was this inner voice guiding you. You just may not have recognized it consciously at the time. If you're beginning to sense that there might be another way to navigate your choices, one that doesn't leave you exhausted from overthinking or paralyzed by fear of making the wrong move, write in the comments, "I'm ready to hear clearly." The first alignment might surprise you because it goes against everything our achievement-oriented culture has taught us about spiritual growth. We've been conditioned to believe that hearing God's voice requires tremendous effort, longer prayers, more intense devotion, stricter discipline, deeper sacrifice. We exhaust ourselves trying to become worthy enough, spiritual enough, pure enough to finally deserve divine guidance. But here's the hidden truth that transforms everything. The strain itself is the problem. The harder you try to grasp divine wisdom through effort alone, the more you create internal noise that drowns out the very voice you're seeking. Think about it like this. When you're desperately trying to remember someone's name and it sits just out of reach in your memory, what happens? The more you strain and force it, the more elusive it becomes. But the moment you relax and stop pushing, suddenly the name surfaces effortlessly. Divine guidance works exactly the same way. The I Am consciousness within you isn't playing hide and seek, testing whether you can pray hard enough or meditate long enough to finally break through. It's been broadcasting continuously like a radio station that never goes off the air, transmitting on a frequency that becomes crystal clear the moment you stop straining and simply recognize what's already present. This shift from effort to awareness changes the entire journey. Instead of approaching each decision from a place of spiritual anxiety, wondering if you've done enough to deserve clarity, you begin from a foundation of trust that the guidance is already there, already speaking, already flowing through your consciousness. The transformation in how you make decisions becomes tangible when you understand that you're not trying to create something new. You're removing the barriers to what has always been true. Your mornings hold a power that most people completely overlook. Those first few seconds after you wake up, before your mind floods with the day's demands, before anxiety about pending decisions creeps in, before you reach for your phone and immerse yourself in everyone else's reality. That's sacred ground. In those moments, your consciousness is still quiet enough to establish the foundational frequency for everything that follows. This isn't about adding another obligation to your morning routine or setting your alarm earlier to squeeze in a complicated practice. It's about a simple recognition that takes less time than checking your first text message. Before your feet touch the floor tomorrow morning, pause for just one breath and silently acknowledge this truth. The kingdom of heaven is within me right now, and divine guidance is my natural state of being. These aren't magical incantations or empty affirmations. They're recognition statements that align your awareness with reality. What makes this practice so powerful isn't the words themselves. It's the shift in consciousness they represent. You're establishing a mindset that becomes the lens through which you experience every interaction, every challenge, every choice that unfolds throughout your day. That meeting where you need to make a difficult decision, you enter it already anchored in divine wisdom. The conversation that usually triggers your reactive patterns, you approach it from a completely different foundation. Now, I want to reveal what happens when you practice this recognition consistently and why the journey of transformation unfolds in ways you might not expect. The impact of beginning your day with this awareness creates ripples that extend far beyond those initial moments, fundamentally reshaping how you navigate the countless micro-decisions and major crossroads that define your life. If this understanding of recognition over straining resonates with something in you, write in the comments, "I choose awareness." Here's what most people get wrong about spiritual practice, and it's costing them the very transformation they're seeking. We live in a culture obsessed with intensity, with dramatic breakthroughs, and life-changing peak experiences. You've probably approached spiritual growth the same way, waiting until you hit a crisis, then throwing yourself into hours of desperate prayer, hoping that sheer intensity will finally crack open the heavens and deliver the guidance you need. But behind the scenes of every genuine transformation I've witnessed, there's a pattern that contradicts everything we've been taught about breakthrough moments. 5 minutes of gentle, daily recognition will reshape how you hear divine guidance far more profoundly than occasional marathon sessions fueled by panic and fear. Your consciousness doesn't respond to dramatic overhauls the way our achievement culture suggests. Instead, it's like tending a garden. You don't ignore the plants for weeks and then dump gallons of water on them in a single desperate attempt at revival. That approach creates damage, not growth. You provide small amounts of consistent nourishment, and the garden naturally flourishes. Your ability to discern God's voice in your decisions works exactly the same way. Each time you pause to recognize the presence within, you're making subtle adjustments to your spiritual receptors, gradually tuning yourself to divine frequency with increasing precision. The beauty of this approach reveals itself in how it transforms your actual daily experience, not just your theoretical understanding. Throughout any given day, you encounter dozens of decision points that either reinforce your old reactive patterns or create new pathways for divine wisdom to flow through. Your boss delivers criticism that normally would trigger immediate defensiveness. Traffic makes you late for an important meeting, and panic starts flooding your system. An unexpected bill arrives in your inbox, and financial anxiety grips your chest. These moments happen so quickly that you barely register the split second where you have a choice about how to respond. This is precisely where sacred pauses reveal their extraordinary power. You have approximately 3 seconds before your conditioned responses take over completely. 3 seconds where you can insert awareness into situations that previously triggered automatic reactions. Even 30 seconds of returning to that inner kingdom creates space for divine clarity to emerge beyond the surface appearances of whatever challenge you're facing. You're not denying the reality of the situation or pretending difficulties don't exist. You're accessing a deeper dimension of wisdom that provides guidance your anxious, reactive mind simply cannot access when it's dominated by fear. What makes this practice so transformative is how gradually it rewires your entire approach to decision-making. At first, you might only remember to pause after you've already reacted, recognizing in hindsight that another option was available. That's perfectly fine. That's progress. Then you begin catching yourself mid-reaction, inserting awareness into moments that used to unfold completely unconsciously. Eventually, and this is where the journey becomes truly remarkable, the pause starts feeling natural, almost instinctive, as your default setting shifts from reactive fear to receptive awareness. Now, I want to explore how this foundation of consistent practice and sacred pauses specifically transforms the 2 areas of life where we most desperately need divine guidance, where fear most easily drowns out that inner voice, and where the decisions we make carry the heaviest consequences for our well-being and peace. If you're starting to see how these small, consistent practices could change your relationship with decision-making, write in the comments, "Small shifts, big transformation." The second alignment reveals itself most powerfully in those moments when your body sends signals that trigger immediate fear. You notice an unusual symptom, a persistent pain, something that feels off, and within seconds, your mind spirals into worst-case scenarios. Your entire focus narrows exclusively to material solutions, researching symptoms online, scheduling appointments, analyzing every physical sensation with increasing anxiety. In this state of panic, something profound happens that you might not even notice. Your spiritual awareness completely shuts down. The connection to inner guidance that was available just moments before becomes inaccessible, drowned out by the noise of fear. If these insights speak to where you are on your journey, subscribe to continue exploring together. Each video translates spiritual wisdom into practical steps you can actually implement in your daily life. But here's the transformation that changes everything about health-related decisions. Before allowing panic to hijack your consciousness, you can pause and turn within to recognize a deeper truth. In the kingdom of heaven within you, there exists only wholeness and divine perfection. This isn't about denying physical reality or rejecting medical wisdom. It's about creating sacred space where God's voice can speak clearly about your well-being, guiding you toward appropriate action from a foundation of peace rather than terror. The decisions you make about your health from this consciousness are fundamentally different than those made from panic. You're still seeking proper care, still taking necessary action, but you're doing so guided by clarity rather than driven by fear. The hidden truth behind healing that most people never Discover is that wholeness exists first as a spiritual reality. And when your consciousness aligns with that truth, it creates pathways for well-being that remain completely blocked when fear dominates your awareness. This doesn't guarantee specific outcomes or replace medical treatment, but it transforms the quality of guidance you receive and the peace you experience throughout the journey, regardless of what unfolds. Now, this same principle revolutionizes the other area of life, where fear most easily silences divine guidance, your relationship with money and provision. Financial concerns trigger something primal in us, activating survival instincts that create such intense static that hearing God's voice becomes virtually impossible. You check your bank balance and feel your chest tighten. An unexpected expense arrives and panic floods your entire system. Income decreases and suddenly you're making desperate decisions from a place of scarcity and urgency that overrides any access to spiritual wisdom. The third alignment happens when you shift from scarcity consciousness to recognizing abundance from the kingdom perspective. Divine substance is infinite and omnipresent, and here's what's revolutionary about this understanding. Your actual experience of provision is primarily a reflection of your consciousness, not just external economic conditions. This doesn't mean positive thinking magically creates money or that you ignore practical financial planning. It means that when you bring kingdom awareness to money decisions, you access divine intelligence that sees possibilities your anxious, scarcity-focused mind simply cannot perceive. Opportunities appear that weren't visible through the lens of fear. Creative solutions emerge that your panic-driven thinking never considered. The guidance you receive about earning, spending, and managing resources comes from a place of wisdom that transcends material circumstances. What makes this so powerful in practice is that provision actually follows presence. When unexpected expenses arrive or your income suddenly shifts, instead of immediately spiraling into worst-case scenarios and making reactive decisions, you return first to the awareness that God's voice is speaking guidance even in this exact circumstance. Every financial decision becomes an opportunity to hear divine wisdom rather than another trigger for anxiety that keeps you awake at night, disconnected from the very source of clarity you need. If you've experienced moments where divine guidance provided unexpected solutions to health or financial challenges, write in the comments. Guidance transcends circumstances. The transformation in your financial life becomes tangible when you understand that provision truly follows presence. Picture yourself sitting at your kitchen table, bills spread out in front of you, and the numbers simply don't add up. Your old conditioned response would spiral immediately into panic mode, catastrophizing, desperately strategizing, losing sleep over scenarios that haven't even happened. But when you've cultivated kingdom consciousness through these daily alignments, something fundamentally different occurs. You pause and recognize that divine intelligence sees possibilities that your anxious mind cannot access. You bring transformed awareness to the practical work of addressing the situation, allowing spiritual wisdom to inform material decisions rather than letting material panic completely override your connection to guidance. What surprises most people about this shift is that it doesn't necessarily mean money magically appears or problems vanish without effort. The journey unfolds differently. Unexpected opportunities emerge that weren't visible through the lens of scarcity. Creative solutions surface that your fear-driven thinking never considered. A conversation happens that opens doors you didn't know existed. Behind the scenes of what others might call financial breakthrough is simply consciousness aligned with divine abundance, expressing itself through practical circumstances in ways that logic alone could never predict or manufacture. Now, this same principle of listening for God's voice transforms perhaps the most complex and emotionally charged area of human experience, your relationships. Think about your most challenging relationship right now. Maybe it's your spouse who seems to trigger every insecurity you have. Perhaps it's a parent whose approval you've been seeking your entire life, or a colleague whose behavior constantly sparks frustration and resentment. Your conditioned response focuses exclusively on what's wrong with them, how they need to change, why they're making your life difficult, what you wish they would finally understand. But here's the hidden truth that revolutionizes relational dynamics. The catalyst for relationship transformation isn't finding perfect people or waiting for others to finally become who you want them to be. It's developing perfect listening to God's voice through every single interaction, even and especially the difficult ones. The fourth alignment happens when you shift from trying to control or fix relationships to receiving divine wisdom about how to navigate them. When you approach relationships from kingdom consciousness, you access guidance about how to respond rather than react, what to say in moments of tension, when to speak truth, and when silence serves better, how to set boundaries from love rather than from fear or manipulation. This doesn't make relationship challenges magically disappear or turn difficult people into easy ones. Conflicts still arise, disappointments still occur, people still say hurtful things. But you're navigating these experiences from an entirely different foundation, one that allows revelations about yourself and others that remain completely hidden when you're operating purely from reactive patterns and emotional triggers. The decisions you make in relationships, whether to stay or leave, how to address issues, when to offer grace, and when to maintain boundaries, come from deeper guidance rather than conditioned patterns of defense, attack, or withdrawal. The impact of this shift extends far beyond individual relationships to transform how you experience human connection itself. If you're beginning to see how kingdom consciousness could transform even your most difficult relationships, write in the comments, Divine wisdom guides my connections. The fifth alignment addresses an area where most of us spend the majority of our waking hours, yet rarely consider it spiritual territory at all. For most people, their professional environment represents a complete spiritual dead zone, where divine presence seems distant, irrelevant, or entirely disconnected from the practical demands of getting work done. The pressure of deadlines, office politics, performance expectations, and competition creates such a dense frequency of stress that any awareness of God's voice gets completely drowned out. You might pray before leaving for work, but the moment you step into that office or log into that computer, it's as if you've entered a realm where spiritual guidance simply doesn't apply. But here's the transformation that revolutionizes how you experience those 40, 50, 60 hours each week. The fifth alignment happens when you reframe work from mere employment, from something you endure to pay bills, into spiritual expression itself. That project deadline that usually triggers anxiety becomes an opportunity to witness divine ideas emerging through you in perfect timing. That difficult colleague who normally sparks immediate frustration becomes a chance to perceive the kingdom within both yourself and them, accessing wisdom about how to navigate the dynamic rather than just react to their behavior. This shift doesn't require changing careers or finding spiritually oriented employment. It happens through bringing presence to whatever work you're already doing, recognizing that divine creativity can express itself through spreadsheets and sales calls just as readily as through traditionally spiritual activities. The impact extends far beyond productivity metrics to transform the actual quality of your daily experience. You begin noticing solutions flowing naturally when your consciousness isn't constricted by stress and fear. You find yourself handling workplace challenges with clarity that surprises even you. Behind the scenes of truly innovative work is often this exact dynamic: unlimited intelligence flowing through consciousness that's open enough to receive it, rather than closed down by anxiety about performance and survival. Now, as kingdom consciousness matures through your consistent practice of these 5 alignments, something precious emerges that goes beyond any specific benefit in health, finances, relationships, or career. You awaken to an authentic peace that doesn't depend on circumstances being perfect, on everything going your way, or on finally having all your problems solved. This isn't the artificial calm that comes from temporarily having everything under control. It's a foundational frequency of tranquility that transcends whatever situation you're facing. Financial setbacks still require practical action and wise decision-making, but you navigate them without the paralysis of fear that used to shut down your ability to think clearly. Relationship difficulties still need to be addressed, conversations still need to happen, boundaries still need setting, but you approach them without the emotional reactivity that used to make everything more complicated and painful. The hidden truth here is profound and often missed. When you position yourself to hear God's voice clearly through these daily alignments, what you discover isn't just guidance about specific decisions, though that certainly flows more readily. What emerges is something deeper, an unshakable foundation that remains steady regardless of external conditions. This peace becomes the ground from which all your decisions arise, the lens through which you perceive challenges, the anchor that holds you steady when life's storms inevitably arrive. If you're sensing how this foundation of peace could transform not just your decisions, but your entire experience of life itself, write in the comments, "Peace guides my path." Now, I want to be completely honest with you about what this journey actually demands, because the pathway to hearing God's voice in every decision requires something that challenges everything our instant gratification culture has conditioned us to expect. Consistent commitment regardless of immediate results. This isn't a weekend workshop that produces instant enlightenment or a 21-day challenge that permanently transforms your awareness. The transformation unfolds through those small, repeated recognitions we've been exploring, gradually reshaping your consciousness through accumulated practice rather than through a single dramatic breakthrough. Here's the reality that most spiritual teachers won't tell you directly, but you deserve to hear. Some people begin these 5 daily alignments and experience remarkable shifts within weeks, suddenly finding clarity in decisions that used to paralyze them, sensing divine guidance with a certainty they've never felt before. Others practice diligently for months before significant changes become visible in their experience. A few grow impatient when miracles don't materialize on their preferred timeline and abandon the practice altogether, never discovering what was just beginning to emerge beneath the surface. The decisive factor between these different experiences isn't spiritual talent or divine favoritism. It's simple persistence, the willingness to continue recognizing the presence within, even when immediate evidence doesn't scream validation. Each time, you pause to acknowledge the kingdom within. Each morning, you begin with that simple recognition, each sacred pause during challenging moments. You're creating subtle adjustments in your spiritual receptors. Think about the most meaningful transformations in your life. Did any of them happen overnight? Real change, the kind that fundamentally reshapes your experience, almost always unfolds through accumulated small decisions rather than singular dramatic moments. Your consciousness works exactly the same way, gradually tuning itself to divine frequency with increasing precision through consistent practice. But here's perhaps the most liberating truth of this entire teaching, something that removes every excuse and eliminates every barrier between where you are right now and the guidance you're seeking. You can begin this very moment, exactly where you are, with whatever understanding you currently possess. You don't need to master complex theology first. You don't need years of meditation experience, or advanced spiritual credentials. You don't need to become someone different or achieve some elevated status before you're qualified to hear God's voice. The kingdom of heaven exists within you right now, at this very moment, exactly as you are. Even 3 seconds of genuine acknowledgement creates space for divine clarity to emerge through whatever decision you're facing. Your ability to hear divine guidance isn't something you need to build through years of arduous effort. It's something you simply recognize as already complete within your consciousness. The recognition doesn't create the connection. It reveals what has always been present, always been speaking, always been available to you. This means that the profound shift in how you make decisions can literally begin with your very next breath, with the very next choice point you encounter today. If you're ready to begin this journey right now, exactly where you are, without waiting for perfect conditions or more spiritual preparation, write in the comments, "I start today." If you've stayed with me through this entire journey, you're exactly the kind of person this message was meant to reach. There's something in you that's already awakening to these truths, already recognizing the divine presence that's been speaking within you all along. That recognition brought you here, and it's going to continue guiding you forward in ways you can't even imagine yet. I create these videos for people like you, seekers who are ready to move beyond surface-level spirituality into genuine transformation, into actually hearing God's voice in the practical, everyday decisions that shape your life. If this teaching resonated with something deep inside you, if even one insight shifted your awareness, I'd love for you to subscribe and join this community of people who are learning to live from kingdom consciousness. Each video we explore together translates profound spiritual truths into steps you can actually implement today, not someday when you're more ready or more spiritual. If this message felt like it was speaking directly to your heart, if you sense that you were meant to hear this today, write in the comments, "This message was meant for me." Your story, your journey, your recognition might be exactly what another person needs to hear to begin their own awakening. There's real power in acknowledging these truths, even if it's just through a few typed words. And if you found value in what we explored together today, if this conversation created even a small shift in how you understand divine guidance, consider tapping that like button. Not for algorithms or numbers, but as a quiet acknowledgement between us that this conversation mattered, that these truths still have power to transform lives in our distracted, anxious world. There's a video right here about maintaining this connection to divine guidance, even when life gets overwhelming, when circumstances seem to contradict everything we've discussed today. It's a natural continuation of this journey, showing you how to sustain this awareness through the challenges that inevitably arise. Click and continue with me over there as we go deeper into living from this consciousness. Until we meet again, remember, the kingdom of heaven is within you right now, and God's voice is already speaking. You're simply learning to recognize what has always been true. Have you ever felt like your prayers are simply messages sent into an empty void, with no certainty they're even being received? Like God's voice is muffled by layers of noise, doubt, and distraction in your daily life? What if I told you that the greatest spiritual misunderstanding of our time isn't about God's willingness to speak, but about where we're positioning ourselves to listen? This fundamental misconception has kept countless sincere believers trapped in a cycle of spiritual frustration, constantly straining to hear a distant voice when the divine is whispering directly from within. Has this ever happened to you? You face a crisis, perhaps a health scare, financial trouble, or relationship conflict, and immediately begin praying intensely, begging God for guidance, yet feeling that his voice remains frustratingly silent or unclear. You're not alone. This experience is nearly universal because we've been taught to look in the wrong direction entirely. We've learned to Perceive God as existing somewhere out there, beyond the clouds, beyond our reach, beyond our immediate experience. But what if the veil between you and God's voice isn't nearly as thick as you've been led to believe? The revolutionary understanding I'm about to share with you today transforms not just your prayer life, but every aspect of your spiritual journey. The kingdom of heaven, that divine reality where God's voice speaks clearly, is not a distant realm waiting for us after death or accessible only to spiritual elites. It is, as Scripture profoundly reveals, a state of consciousness that exists within you at this very moment. But before we begin, please hit the like button and let me know where in the world you're watching from today. It's always fascinating seeing who's joining us from around the world. And if you haven't already, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any of our future videos. Stay with me until the end of this video, because what you're about to discover might fundamentally change your entire relationship with prayer, spiritual guidance, and divine communication. When you truly grasp that hearing God's voice isn't something you need to strain for, but rather recognize as already present within the very essence of your being, your spiritual practice transforms from desperate pleading to joyful communion. Imagine waking each morning with an innate awareness of divine guidance flowing naturally through your consciousness. Picture approaching challenges not with anxiety about making the right decision, but with a quiet confidence in the still, small voice that never stops speaking within you. This isn't wishful thinking or esoteric mysticism. It's practical spirituality that produces tangible transformation in your discernment, decision-making, and spiritual sensitivity. The 5 daily shifts we'll explore today have helped countless believers move from spiritual static to crystal clear divine communication. These aren't complicated techniques requiring years of theological training. They're simple adjustments in how you position your consciousness to receive what's already being transmitted. What would your relationship with God look like if you stopped straining to hear a distant voice and instead awakened to the divine whisper that has been speaking within you all along? The first shift begins with a profound recognition that changes everything. The practice of the presence. This isn't about complicated meditation techniques or esoteric rituals. It's about developing a continuous awareness of the divine kingdom that already exists within you. This awareness becomes the foundation for hearing God's voice with remarkable clarity. If these insights about hearing God's voice have resonated with you, subscribe to join our growing community of spiritual seekers. We're exploring practical ways to recognize divine guidance in everyday life. The transformation begins with your first waking moments. Tomorrow morning, before your feet even touch the floor, pause for just a moment and silently acknowledge, "The kingdom of heaven is within me right now. This divine consciousness is my true nature." This tiny decision creates ripples that extend far beyond that moment, establishing a mindset that shapes how you'll respond to everything the day brings. Behind the scenes of every spiritual breakthrough is this fundamental shift in awareness. You're not creating something new, you're recognizing what has always been present. This recognition acts like a tuning fork, adjusting your spiritual frequency to align with divine communication that's already broadcasting within you. The journey toward clearer spiritual hearing continues throughout your day. Whether you're driving to work, sitting in a meeting, or preparing dinner, these ordinary moments become sacred opportunities to practice presence. A brief pause, a quiet breath, a simple acknowledgement, God is speaking within me now. Now, I want to go even deeper into what might be the most overlooked truth on the spiritual path. The hidden insight that most seekers miss is surprisingly simple. Consistency matters infinitely more than intensity. This revelation contradicts much of our cultural programming about spiritual growth. where we're often led to believe that dramatic spiritual experiences are the primary pathway to transformation. The impact of 5 minutes of presence, practiced daily, will far outweigh occasional hours of desperate spiritual effort. Your spiritual receptors are being fine-tuned through regular, gentle adjustments, rather than occasional, intense overhauls. It's the difference between watering a plant daily with a small cup versus drowning it once a month with a fire hose. Throughout your day, especially during challenging moments, take even 30 seconds to return to this inner kingdom. When your boss criticizes your work, when traffic makes you late, when unexpected bills arrive, these are precisely the decision points where this practice reveals its power. Instead of reacting immediately from fear or frustration, pause and recognize the truth that exists beyond material appearances. The mindset shift happens gradually but unmistakably. You'll begin noticing subtle changes at first. A deeper peace in stressful situations, unexpected clarity about persistent problems, a growing sense of divine guidance in daily decisions. These revelations unfold naturally as you consistently return to the awareness that God's voice isn't something you need to search for. It's the very essence of your consciousness. If you've ever experienced even a fleeting moment where God's guidance suddenly became crystal clear amid life's chaos, write in the comments, "I've glimpsed the inner voice." The journey of hearing God's voice more clearly extends beyond dedicated prayer time into every aspect of daily living. Consider one of life's most challenging battlegrounds, your physical health. When symptoms appear, whether minor discomfort or serious diagnosis, our conditioned response typically follows a predictable pattern: panic, followed by exclusively seeking material solutions. This natural reaction often drowns out the very spiritual guidance we need most. The third shift in your daily practice involves approaching health challenges with a transformed mindset. Instead of allowing fear to dominate your consciousness, first turn within to recognize the spiritual truth. In the kingdom of heaven within you, there is only wholeness and divine perfection. This recognition creates a sacred space where God's voice can speak clearly about your well-being. Please understand, this approach isn't about rejecting medical wisdom or practical care. The inner journey I'm describing integrates both spiritual awareness and appropriate action. When facing health concerns, your first decision point becomes pivotal. Will you react from fear or respond from spiritual awareness? Think about someone with chronic pain who's been told they'll simply have to live with their condition. From material consciousness alone, this prognosis feels like a prison sentence. But from kingdom consciousness, they recognize that physical appearance isn't the final reality. Their spiritual essence remains whole regardless of bodily conditions. This recognition creates space for hearing divine guidance that might otherwise be blocked by fear and resignation. Now, I want to explore how this same principle transforms another area where anxiety often drowns out God's voice: your financial life. Financial concerns trigger our deepest fears about survival and security, creating so much static that divine guidance becomes nearly impossible to discern. The hidden truth behind financial freedom isn't about the numbers in your bank account, but about the awareness in your consciousness. From kingdom perspective, you recognize that divine substance is infinite and omnipresent. Your experience of supply is primarily a reflection of your consciousness, not external economic conditions. This profound shift allows you to make practical financial decisions from a place of clarity and trust rather than scarcity and panic. When unexpected expenses arise or income decreases, your first response isn't fear, but a return to the awareness that God's voice is speaking guidance even now, in this circumstance. Consider how different your financial journey might be if you approached every money decision as an opportunity to hear divine wisdom rather than a source of anxiety. This doesn't mean ignoring practical budgeting or financial planning. It means bringing a different quality of presence to these activities. The transformation often begins subtly. Perhaps you notice less emotional reactivity when bills arrive or unexpected opportunities for increased income appear. These aren't coincidences, but revelations of what becomes possible when you position yourself to hear God's voice regarding provision. If you've experienced moments where divine guidance provided unexpected solutions to financial challenges, type in the comments, "Provision follows presence." The fourth shift in hearing God's voice more clearly emerges in what might be our most complex arena, relationships. Think about it. Our connections with others often become the very battlegrounds where divine guidance is most difficult to discern. We approach relationships seeking validation, security, or fulfillment from others, creating a dynamic where our spiritual receptors become clouded by emotional needs and expectations. Kingdom consciousness transforms this relational landscape completely. When you recognize the divine presence speaking within yourself, you naturally begin perceiving it in others as well. This shift doesn't magically make relationship challenges disappear, but it provides an entirely different foundation for navigating them. Consider how this plays out in everyday interactions. When your spouse says something hurtful, your immediate impulse might be defensive reaction. But pausing to recognize the kingdom within creates a moment where you can hear guidance beyond the emotional trigger. When a friend disappoints you, the awareness of divine presence provides perspective that transcends the immediate situation. The catalyst for relationship transformation isn't finding perfect people, but developing perfect listening. You begin hearing God's voice speaking through even difficult interactions, revealing insights about yourself and others that would otherwise remain hidden behind emotional reactions. This mindset revolution extends beyond intimate relationships to every human connection. Workplace conflicts, family tensions, even brief encounters with strangers become opportunities to hear divine wisdom rather than obstacles to peace. The blueprint for healthy relationships emerges not from external advice, but from internal guidance that becomes increasingly clear through practice. Now I want to explore what might be the most overlooked accelerator in developing clear spiritual hearing: the power of community. While inner recognition is ultimately a personal journey, seeking spiritual community becomes essential as your awareness deepens. Finding others who understand this practice creates an environment where your receptivity to God's voice can expand exponentially. The hidden dynamic at work here differs fundamentally from conventional social connections. Unlike groups formed around shared interests or activities, authentic spiritual community provides a context where inner recognition is valued, supported, and multiplied through shared experience. When multiple people practice presence together, the collective field of awareness often reveals guidance that might remain obscure to any individual. Think of it as spiritual acoustics. Certain environments naturally amplify sound, while others dampen it. Similarly, some relational contexts naturally enhance your ability to hear divine guidance, while others create interference that makes clarity nearly impossible. The cultivation of spiritual fellowship isn't about religious obligation, but strategic positioning for clearer reception. This doesn't require abandoning existing relationships or joining formal organizations. Sometimes spiritual community forms organically around kitchen tables, in living rooms, or through meaningful conversations, with just one other person who shares your commitment to presence. The essential element isn't the structure, but the shared awareness. If you've experienced moments where divine guidance became clearer through connection with others on a similar spiritual path, share in the comments. Community clarifies guidance. The fifth shift in hearing God's voice clearly transforms one of the most significant portions of your waking hours, your work life. For many people, professional environments represent spiritual dead zones where divine guidance seems particularly difficult to access. The pressure of deadlines, office politics, and performance expectations creates a frequency of anxiety that drowns out the still, small voice within. Kingdom consciousness revolutionizes this dynamic by transforming work from mere employment to spiritual expression. When facing workplace challenges, the simple practice of pausing to recognize the divine reality beyond material appearances creates space for unexpected insight and guidance. A project deadline that once triggered anxiety becomes an opportunity to witness divine ideas emerging in perfect timing. A difficult colleague interaction that would have sparked defensiveness becomes a chance to perceive the kingdom within both yourself and the other person. Subscribe to continue this journey of spiritual discovery with us. Each video translates profound spiritual truths into practical steps you can implement immediately in your daily walk with God. Behind the scenes of truly innovative work is this profound shift in awareness. The most groundbreaking creative solutions rarely emerge from stressed, constricted consciousness. They flow naturally when we access the unlimited intelligence that speaks within kingdom awareness. This isn't abstract philosophy, but practical transformation that affects productivity, problem-solving, and professional fulfillment. Consider how different your work experience might be if you approached each task not as a separate entity struggling through challenges alone, but as a living expression of divine consciousness. You'd approach obstacles from abundance rather than scarcity, from creative possibility rather than limitation, from spiritual partnership rather than isolated struggle. The impact extends far beyond measurable metrics to transform the very quality of your daily experience. Now I want to explore what might be the most significant breakthrough on this journey of hearing God more clearly. As kingdom consciousness matures through consistent practice, you discover something precious beyond measure, an unshakable peace that doesn't depend on circumstances being perfect. This isn't positive thinking or emotional bypassing. It's authentic spiritual awareness that remains steady through life's inevitable fluctuations. The revelation at the heart of this peace is profound. When you position yourself to hear God's voice clearly, what you discover isn't just guidance about specific decisions, but a foundational frequency of tranquility that transcends particular situations. This peace becomes your anchor through every challenge, loss, and disappointment. When financial setbacks occur, you still take practical action, but without the paralysis of fear. When relationships face difficulties, you address them directly, but without the drama of emotional reactivity. When health concerns arise, you seek appropriate care, but without being consumed by worry about outcomes. Divine guidance flows with remarkable clarity when your consciousness isn't clouded by anxiety. A woman who had practiced kingdom consciousness for several years faced the unexpected loss of a spouse. Friends were amazed at her response. Not an absence of grief, but a profound peace that coexisted with natural sorrow. She described knowing, beyond intellectual understanding, that the divine voice that had proven faithful in smaller challenges remained accessible even through life's darkest valley. If you've experienced moments where unexpected peace arrived precisely when you needed divine guidance most, share in the comments. Peace precedes clarity. Now I want to reveal what might be the most challenging aspect of hearing God's voice with greater clarity. The pathway to this transformation requires something that most spiritual seekers in today's world are unwilling to give: consistent commitment, regardless of immediate results. Let's be honest about what this journey truly demands. This isn't a weekend workshop or 21-day challenge that produces instant enlightenment. The breakthrough comes through daily practice, even when you feel absolutely no immediate effects. Faith in spiritual truth when material appearances seem to contradict it completely. and patience through what can be a painfully gradual development process. The hidden dynamic at work here is countercultural in almost every way. Some who begin this practice experience dramatic breakthroughs within weeks or months. Others work diligently for years before significant changes appear visibly in their experience. A few grow impatient and abandon the practice when immediate miracles fail to materialize. The decisive factor isn't spiritual talent or divine favoritism, but simple persistence, the willingness to continue recognizing spiritual truth regardless of apparent results. Think about the most meaningful transformations in your life. Did any of them happen overnight? Real change. The kind that reshapes your entire experience, almost always unfolds through consistent small shifts rather than dramatic singular events. Hearing God's voice with greater clarity follows this same developmental arc. Each recognition creates subtle adjustments in your spiritual receptors, gradually tuning you to divine frequency with increasing precision. The blueprint for success here involves embracing what modern culture rejects entirely, the wisdom of patience. Our society has conditioned us to expect immediate gratification in virtually every domain, from instant downloads to same-day delivery. We bring this same expectation to spiritual practice, wanting instant enlightenment or immediate healing. The revolution that transforms your journey is accepting that spiritual development follows natural laws that cannot be rushed or circumvented. Consider the growth of an oak tree. No amount of impatience, effort, or technique will make an acorn reach its full stature in a month. It follows a developmental timeline encoded in its very nature. Similarly, consciousness unfolds according to its own divine timing. The mindset shift involves aligning your expectations with this natural process rather than imposing artificial timelines based on impatience or comparison with others. This doesn't mean passive waiting, but active participation in the process. Just as a gardener creates optimal conditions for growth without directly forcing the plant to mature faster, your consistent practice creates the perfect environment for spiritual hearing to develop naturally. Every moment you pause to recognize the kingdom within, you're providing essential nourishment for this unfolding awareness. If you're willing to embrace this journey of gradual unfolding, trusting the process even when immediate results aren't apparent, type in the comments, "I choose patient persistence." Now I want to offer perhaps the most liberating truth of this entire journey. You can begin right now, exactly where you are, with whatever understanding you currently possess. The path to hearing God's voice more clearly doesn't require prerequisites or spiritual credentials. You don't need to master complex theology or achieve perfect meditation first. You don't need special training or decades of spiritual study. The kingdom of heaven is within you right now. It has always been there, and it will always be there. This insight contradicts much of our conventional spiritual programming. We've been conditioned to believe that divine communication requires elaborate preparation, special techniques, or advanced spiritual status. The revolutionary understanding that transforms this journey is recognizing that your ability to hear God's voice clearly isn't something you need to create through effort. It's something you simply recognize as already present. Think about the implications of this truth in your daily experience. The blueprint for transformation isn't about adding something new to your life, but removing the barriers to what already exists eternally within your consciousness. Your recognition doesn't create divine guidance, but reveals what has always been speaking beneath the surface of your awareness. The decision point you face in this moment isn't whether to begin an arduous spiritual journey requiring special resources or rare abilities. It's simply whether you'll acknowledge what already exists within you. This acknowledgement can begin with your very next breath, regardless of your current circumstances, spiritual background, or perceived limitations. The practical pathway forward couldn't be simpler. Start today, this very moment, by recognizing as often as you remember, the kingdom of heaven is within me now. Divine presence is my true nature. Spiritual guidance is speaking within my consciousness, regardless of external appearances. This recognition isn't complicated or esoteric. It's a simple return to truth that anyone can practice. The framework for implementation follows natural rhythms of daily life. Practice this recognition in the morning when you first awaken, throughout challenges when clarity seems most elusive, before sleep as you review the day's journey. The consistency of return matters infinitely more than the duration of each recognition. Even 3 seconds of genuine acknowledgement creates space for divine clarity to emerge. The behind-the-scenes reality of this practice involves embracing both progress and setbacks with equal grace. Be patient with yourself through inevitable inconsistency. Some days you'll remember frequently, other days hardly at all. Some recognitions will feel profoundly meaningful, others mechanical and routine. The transformative power works through all of these variations when approached with genuine intention rather than perfectionism. Celebrate small victories along the way, moments when divine guidance suddenly becomes crystal clear, when peace arrives unexpectedly amid chaos, when creative solutions emerge from nowhere. Learn from temporary defeats, times when you forget completely, when emotional reactions override spiritual awareness, when you find yourself operating entirely from material consciousness. If you're ready to begin this simple practice of recognition today, write in the comments, "I recognize the kingdom within." What makes this approach to hearing God's voice so uniquely powerful is that it doesn't require you to become someone different or adopt artificial spiritual behaviors. Unlike many spiritual practices that demand you change your personality, lifestyle, or natural way of being, this recognition simply invites you to embrace who you've always been beneath the surface of material appearances. The transformation paradox at work here is profound. The journey toward clearer spiritual hearing isn't about becoming someone new, but about recognizing your original nature that has always existed. This isn't about adding something foreign to your experience, but removing the layers of conditioning that have muffled divine communication within you. Think about how liberating this truth really is. You don't need to force yourself into uncomfortable spiritual personas or pretend to be someone you're not. The blueprint for authentic spiritual connection has been encoded in your consciousness from the beginning. Every time you turn within to acknowledge this spiritual truth, you're not creating something artificial. You're removing another layer of illusion that has kept you imprisoned in limitation and fear. This recognition works within your unique personality, circumstances, and life path. Whether you're naturally analytical or intuitive, extroverted or introspective, artistically expressive or practically minded, the kingdom consciousness adapts to your authentic self rather than demanding conformity to external spiritual stereotypes. The decision framework for implementation becomes remarkably simple. Allow yourself to be who you truly are. While practicing presence, your natural qualities become channels for divine expression rather than obstacles to be overcome. This integration of spiritual awareness with authentic selfhood creates a sustainable pathway that doesn't require constant effort or pretense. Now I want to reveal what might be the most overlooked dimension of hearing God's voice clearly. The journey of recognition doesn't happen in isolation. It naturally ripples outward and touches countless lives around you. Spiritual. Truth was never meant to be held tightly as intellectual knowledge, but shared openly as lived experience. This sharing doesn't require becoming a teacher or preacher. It happens organically through your transformed presence in everyday relationships and situations. As you practice hearing God's voice more clearly through these 5 daily shifts, you become a living example that quietly inspires others to begin their own practice of recognition. Consider the hidden impact of your spiritual journey on those around you. When you respond to challenges from kingdom awareness rather than reactive fear, you demonstrate a different way of being that others naturally notice. When you make decisions from divine guidance rather than anxiety, you create ripples of transformation that extend far beyond your individual experience. The catalyst for spiritual awakening often isn't elaborate teaching, but simple authenticity. Your willingness to acknowledge the kingdom within becomes permission for others to recognize the same reality in themselves. This multiplication happens without effort or intention. It's the natural result of living from spiritual truth in everyday situations. If you've noticed how your own spiritual practice has subtly influenced others around you, share in the comments. Presence creates ripples. As we draw this conversation to a close, I'm reminded of something profound that spiritual teachers have emphasized throughout the ages. The journey of hearing God's voice clearly isn't meant to be a solitary pursuit, but a shared awakening that ripples through our collective consciousness. If these teachings about recognizing the kingdom within have resonated with something deep inside you today, I'd love to continue this exploration together. Subscribe to join our community of spiritual seekers who are practicing this recognition in their daily lives. Each video explores practical ways to experience divine guidance more clearly through everyday challenges and opportunities. The most beautiful part of this journey is that every person who embraces these practices becomes a living testament to the possibility of deeper spiritual connection. If today's message felt like it was speaking directly to your heart, write in the comments, "The kingdom within awakens." Your story might be exactly what another seeker needs to hear to begin their own practice of recognition. If you found value in these insights about hearing God's voice more clearly, consider tapping that like button. Not for algorithms or metrics, but as a quiet acknowledgement that spiritual truth still matters in our distracted world. It's a simple gesture that helps others discover these timeless principles. There's a video right here about maintaining spiritual awareness through challenging circumstances that builds beautifully on what we've discussed today. Click and continue with me over there as we explore how to sustain divine connection even when external conditions seem to contradict spiritual truth. Until next time, remember that the kingdom of heaven is within you right now, waiting only for your recognition.